All right, well, welcome today to our open mic series here at Katalyst. My name is Jesse White, and I will be moderating today what we hope is a lively and interactive conversation with the Katalyst team. Today, I am excited to introduce, again, Kyle MacNaughton, who has been a longtime participant in these series. And Kyle, I look forward to the conversation today and really helping educate our customers and clients and other folks in the arena of how to participate in this new normal and how to make sure that everything that you're doing is not only effective, but that it's also well received by your clients as well. And so I have a small presentation to share today. Hopefully you guys can see that on the screen, and I'm getting thumbs up that you in fact can. And so with that being the case, we'll go ahead and dig in. So again, my name is Jesse White, and I'll be participating in leading the discussion today with my colleague and employee that I get an opportunity to work with every day, Kyle MacNaughton. Kyle is a longtime employee at Katalyst and runs what we call our adoption practice. And so that is specifically how organizations consume technology and furthermore utilize it to impact their customers in a positive manner. Kyle, as some of you know, this is our third episode here in the open mic series at Katalyst. We've been joking with Kyle that he has a bird. He actually does not. And in case you're wondering, Kyle is in the office today practicing social distancing with me as well. We're both using some of the technology that we're going to talk about today. So our conversation is specifically around an agnostic approach to getting the most from your solution. So we've all reached this perpetual snow day, as it seems, and now we find ourselves in a mode where we're all working from home or maybe in the office. But the point is that we're not able to walk up and communicate with people as we have traditionally, and we're depending more on these technologies. Before we get into this conversation, I wanted to talk a little bit about really some of the current events and what we've seen in the market. So everybody's aware in the last week or so, we've seen some major security flaws be exposed by some of the providers. We've seen a huge uptick in consumption of services, again, across all three of the major platforms, those being Zoom, Webex from Cisco Systems, and Teams from Microsoft. And so all of those things are continuing to explode. I'm sure we've all seen some sort of performance degradation, throughout the course of our use of these products. But today, what we're really going to focus on are the top 10 things we feel like any organization can implement to make their behavior and experience more enjoyable and more easy to digest in this, what we call our new normal. So these top 10 things are really summarized like this. So the first thing we're going to talk about is application awareness and making sure that everybody has what they need on their systems at home or on their workstation, laptop, whatever you're using, iPad, it doesn't matter, agnostic in device. We're going to talk about some tips in scheduling and what you guys can do to make sure that you're not putting burdens on systems that can impact your user experience. We're going to shift into some of the background applications and what you can do in that space to make it more palatable to use every day, all day. We're going to talk about some of the security mechanisms that you can tweak and tune inside your environment to make the experience more pleasant. We're going to also talk about how to reduce simultaneous traffic, right? We use this term netiquette in the industry, and we're going to make sure that you guys are at least aware of some of the things that you can do, be it at your corporate office, if you are working from there, if you're in healthcare or some critical business, or at home as well. We're going to talk about some of the further techniques that you can deploy even at the workstation level, right? So whatever device you are using, how you can make that more enjoyable for you and your clients. And then we're going to talk about some performance, how to measure those things, how to make sure that you're getting what you're paying for and that sort of stuff. We're going to give you guys some tips around content sharing, making sure that you know how to use all three of these platforms to share content ahead of time, be it in a channel or outside of it via links, emails, OneDrive, whatever the case may be. We're going to talk about when to shoot video and when not to shoot video. Obviously, we're using video today, but again, there are times that you don't want to do that. And then if all else fails, we're going to talk about how to make it easy from an audio-only perspective if you have users that can't consume the technology or with a flip phone. We do, in fact, support some organizations where some folks, just do not use some of the technologies that we're all used to. So if you look at this kind of in a bulletized agenda format, these are the things that we're going to discuss. And again, I'm not going to read all these. We're going to go through each one of them, but the iconography aligns with each topic, and so we will we'll go into that here in a second. Furthermore, what didn't make the list? So this is one thing that we tried to keep it high impact today, and we tried to make it in a manner in which you can digest it, consume it, and then even furthermore, how you can roll this out to your organization. So part of what Kyle is going to discuss today is some of the adoption practices that he's enabled in some of our clients across all of these platforms. Again, not just a Microsoft Teams deployment or a Zoom or a Webex, but really some of the things that you can do along the way. And since we were told by our marketing department to keep it to 10 things, we couldn't put these in there. And so I did want to at least make sure that as we're all seeing these background images pop up in the ether these days, keep it appropriate, folks. This is one thing that we just wanted to make sure everybody was aware. There are some funny things, and it's great for your happy hours and social parties, but just know that there's a time and a place for everything. And we'd encourage everyone to maintain professionalism throughout the course of this. The second thing is, if you are going to use some of these neat backdrop technologies, be original, right? And make sure you're giving that some thought. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you guys is, if your boss is a Patriots fan, don't have obnoxious things on your wall behind you to kind of rub in Super Bowl victories and that sort of thing. And then remember, as you can see, the guy on the left, you are on video all the time. So if you have a perplexed look about you, that will be seen by the audience as well. So, Kyle, let's jump in. I'm excited to chat with you today. I appreciate you joining the cast today. And if nothing else, let's focus in on these three things. So our first agenda item is really around the application, right? How users interact with these tools. And so I wanted to challenge you a little bit just out of the gate around breaking down some of the differences and what organizations are doing to make this really a seamless experience. I've highlighted just a couple of the basic things across both the Webex platform and the Teams platform, as well as the Zoom platform. But what are you seeing organizations either struggle with in getting this out there? Obviously, this has been a very rapid deployment. Give us some tips and tools that you've seen be successful in at least your adoption world to making this go off without a hitch.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I think as we look at these different platforms, it's become more and more standardized as kind of what people expect from them. And I think that also it's important to realize that people are going to join from different locations or from different platforms, and you kind of have to be willing to jump around. I have all three of these applications on my desktop ready to go, depending on what a customer has, what they need, and what works best for them. So I think it is important for us all to be flexible. I do think, and this is where it's difficult with a rapid deployment, although it also drives some urgency, and that is you really need to build value in that platform for your organization, for your end users, and let them see what they can do with it and things that maybe they haven't thought about that can really transform it from something that they have to jump on to something that enables them to do work that maybe they were used to doing in a different way before. In the collaboration world, we kind of talk about asynchronous and synchronous communication. And I think with these platforms, they're trying to capture a lot of that in one place, right? With Webex, we have Webex Teams where you have that chat capability and file sharing capability. And then that moves into video calls and conferencing. And the same thing with Microsoft, a lot of overlap there between the two. Zoom is definitely more focused on that synchronous video meeting experience, but does have a chat component as well. And I think what we talk about here with the app download management, there are applications for all of these, and oftentimes, especially for internal meetings, the more you have those fat clients available to you, if you can download different devices cases, it can really go a long way to not only opening up what's available to them option-wise, as far as what they can do inside of the application and with the meetings platform, but also enables them to access those much quicker and eliminates a lot of the struggles that end users have joining those different clients. And I think too, the better it is for your internal team, the more that they're able to help and bring people on from an external side as well, right? So if you need to bring in somebody that's using Zoom and you're pulling them into a Webex and they're joining from the web browser, if your end users are all comfortable with using it, it really makes bringing those external people in and they can support them kind of on their own without needing to call on the support desk or just get frustrated.
Okay, good to know. And then from a client management perspective, obviously it's critical in this time to keep up to date with not only software enhancements, but different compression and codec and that sort of thing. How are organizations achieving that, kind of wide, deployment of updates? A lot of these things automatically do it, but for those that don't, are there certain tools that organizations can take advantage of to maybe push this software out and keep their clients updated?
So it does depend on which client you're going with. One thing that is nice about all of these being cloud-based is it takes away that real huge hump that you have to get over to get into the upgrade and rolling that out to everybody. And a lot of times it's pushed automatically to everybody, and they just click a button, and there's a notification that pops up, and it's time to upgrade. Each one has its own little flavor how it does that. I've seen push notifications from the Cisco side and from the Zoom side. Microsoft seems to just kind of force you into it, which they've liked to do for a long time. They just sort of make you do that the next time you log in. But definitely, if it is important to let people know that those upgrades come, and they come fairly frequently, and it's easy for them to do and easy for them to very quickly upgrade to the latest version. And I think that's thankfully has become a lot easier, and some people kind of get fearful of that, although we're kind of getting used to that even in our personal lives with applications on our phones and those sorts of things being upgraded automatically, and it's important that they do that as well with these. Great.
And that would go across mobile. We have seen many of our clients still electing to use things like smartphones, iPads, different things to communicate. Yep. And so for those things that aren't, tethered to the corporate network, if you will, just encourage your users, I think is what you're trying to say, to stay current, to make sure you're getting the updates if it's not forced by either some policy or mechanism internally, right?
That's right. And I think to that, I'll just piggyback on that and say, we kind of tend to focus, I think, on the desktop applications because we spend a lot of our time in meetings there. But if you're joining mobilely, all of these have mobile clients as well, which can really improve that mobile experience. And a lot of those do upgrade kind of on their own in the background. So I think beyond just downloading the desktop client, it's important to have your end users think about where they're going to access these, and then download those applications where they're available. Like you said, iPad, tablet, mobile phone, smartphone, those sorts of things.
Okay, great. And then really just one last question. We still see a lot of people consuming this sort of collaboration technology through a simple web browser. And so when we talk about the application itself, you just mentioned all of these providers have a fat application. How do you make sure that you're either forcing users, is that something that you can do on these platforms to either force them to use the application, or can you still allow people to just connect really organically however they want, be it web or be it fat install? What does that look like in your world?
Yeah, each one has its own little different flavor to it. I have found most of them will allow you to access the things from the web, but encourage you to download those, and it will provide those downloads for you that people can download for free from your application. If you do have admin rights on your machines, and that can be a hindrance on there, it's something to think about. Maybe rolling out. But if for some reason they are not able to download it, they still are able to join it from the web. So, and again, I think this really opens up flexibility for those that maybe I don't have a Zoom account. I've never done a meeting, which is pretty much nobody at this point in time. But if that's the case, they can click that link from your invite and join from a browser without really having too much disruption in their process.
Great, great. Okay. Good. The next thing I wanted to talk about was a little bit about timing being everything. And some of the things that we've seen organizations do really is encourage their users, to be a little bit different in their scheduling mechanisms. And so what are some of the tips that organizations can employ, or at least that you've seen in the past be successful even before the surge, right? So I'd like for you to, talk a little bit about how these applications get embedded into native applications. And then furthermore, some of the hacks or tips and tricks that you feel like are appropriate to have users have a better experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have the little Outlook clip from each of these three, and you can see that you can very quickly put plugins in from the three different platforms and access them. This is from Outlook, which I think is what most people are using. However, you can do a lot of this from the G Suite or maybe another location that you are connecting. You can, of course, schedule from the platform itself. I find it's a little clunky, and people maybe do it if they're used to it, but it's much easier to just hit a button in an email that I'm already sending, and it puts all my meeting information for me there. And what we're starting to see now, which is kind of exciting, as all these platforms emerge, and some are getting stronger in certain areas, or in less so in other areas, we're starting to see cross-platform communication, right? So in Microsoft, I can launch a Webex meeting or a Zoom meeting, right? And some a little bit vice versa. So everybody's kind of trying to figure out, carve out their own little section, but also realizing that there is so much overlap that it's nice to be able to communicate across these different platforms as well. From a scheduling standpoint, and this seems kind of basic and almost silly in a way, but it makes a lot of sense. And with the increased traffic on these platforms, and maybe you've noticed that you hop in a meeting and it's really slow to join, and people are having a hard time connecting, and it's bouncing you back 3 or 4 times. And we're even seeing the platform starting to suggest this, right? Moving your meeting times to a little bit off from the top of the hour and the half hour. And I know we had this one scheduled at 2:30 already, or I would have said maybe we're not using our own best practice here. But booking a meeting at 1:15 or 1:45 even, it doesn't really affect a lot of people that much, but it can really drastically improve the meeting joining experience and that volume. I guess if everybody starts doing that, then we may have to shift back to the regular times. But at least for now, that's a great way to kind of help mitigate that a little bit.
Okay, so essentially the sum of that is look at how you're interacting with your teams, with your clients, and make sure that you are almost adjusting or swinging those traditional times for meetings into times that are less traditional. And to your point, starting at the quarter or the 3/4 of an hour as opposed to the top and the bottom, like 99% of meetings all start.
That's right.
One more question, Kyle, just around this specifically. I'd like to talk a little bit about, how do these actual applications get into Outlook? Is that dependent on version? Is this a patch that you have to roll out? What actually happens there?
Yeah, usually it is a plugin that's downloaded. Of course, Microsoft does have an advantage here from the Outlook standpoint because it's their own product, so they usually come pre-installed, and you've probably seen them even if you aren't using Microsoft Teams. But Webex will offer a plugin download for Webex productivity tools, and there's something very similar for Zoom, to where you can lock those plugins in, sign into your account, and now your Outlook is communicating with your Webex server or your Zoom server, and setting those meetings up for you without having to actually ever touch Webex or Zoom, right, from an application standpoint before it's time to actually join the meeting. So that's it's usually a very quick download and a login to get you in there, and then you're off to the races. So it's very much been streamlined and can really help drive value and get people utilizing the technology that you've invested in.
Great, good to know. Okay. One of the things that we've seen, even some performance issues related, and I know sometimes we have those on different platforms, be it Microsoft Teams or even Zoom, is this concept of making sure that you aren't overtaxing your local machine, right? Because right now, my machine is processing my voice, it's processing my video. If you're really active, right, and moving around and you're kind of one of those animated talkers, I've seen that distort video quality over the time that I've been using it here for the last 10 or so years. What are some things that we can do as consumers of this technology to make sure that in our power, at least, or all the things that we have in our control, outside of the cloud provider, outside of the internet connection, those sorts of things, what can we do on our local machines outside of updating the client to make sure our experience is as best as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one that often gets overlooked. You figure, hey, I'm running everything on this. I've got the fastest, greatest machine that's ever been, and I'm sure it can handle one more application. And a lot of times you aren't thinking about what it takes, even from a local processing standpoint, not even necessarily from an internet bandwidth standpoint, right? And I think, ideally, in an ideal world, we would all have video endpoints like Jesse and I are talking to you on right now, where it's a dedicated processor that's managing our video traffic in and out and audio and all that for us. But that's not the case, especially in this situation now where people are at home. They maybe haven't worked from home in recent days, and they're not used to that. They're working from their computer. It's not a normal setup for them, and maybe their processor's getting taxed. One thing. So we're looking at obviously a Mac desktop here. Mac has some handy tools to kind of track what is available or what is using significant energy on your computer. And I think if you do a quick check and you're noticing performance issues on a consistent basis, and you're kind of wondering what's going on, that's a great place to check up there in the top taskbar. And I know Windows has a task manager as well. Some helpful tools just to see what's open, and you can close some of these things and track them. And of course, you have to look at background applications and make sure you're touching everything and getting rid of unnecessary applications that are running. But if you have a big meeting and there's a lot of people on there, there's a lot of video streams going on, just realize that when you hear those fans kick on in your computer, it's not because they're trying to take off, right? They're working hard for you, so try and give them a break if you can.
Great, and again, this does go back to continuous development on the application side and making sure that you're updated and that you're not using legacy software, so to speak, so that you can have a positive experience. And you gave us two tips. So it's Task Manager on Windows, Systems Manager on the Mac, and then from there, we have seen even in the last week or so, many clients that have had to adjust, full virus kind of scans, right? Full malware scans to not interrupt the video play and that sort of thing. So folks, if you're out there and you've had some complaints or issues, please don't forget to consider those kind of continuous background processes that are running on your client's workstations, because that can impact it greatly. Our next topic is really one that's near and dear to our hearts here at Katalyst, and that is, specifically security and how organizations interact with security in this new world. Now, we've seen lots about security, specifically this week out of one of the providers that we're discussing today. There were some AWS buckets that had millions and millions of recordings, and people were able to access those and post those online. And they really took a black eye, as everybody's aware. And so that's a big thing to keep an eye on. But let's talk about not only from the VPN side of things that we'll get into here in a second, but from a security perspective on your whatever collaboration tool, fill in the blank, right? Be it Teams, be it Webex, be it Zoom. What are some of the things that we can do as organizations to make sure that we're protecting those instances? Because the last thing that I would want to be able, is to give, unauthorized or a bad actor access to my personal recordings, right? I have hundreds and hundreds of recordings in the cloud and that sort of thing, and I'm sure many of us do. So let's talk a little bit about how that works, and is it two-factor authentication? Is it locking down your, your meeting rooms, your personal spaces? What are some of the things that organizations are doing that really do care about security, that want to make sure that their collaboration tools in the cloud are safe?
Yeah, and it's an old joke for sure, right? The collab guy wants everything open, and the security guys want everything locked down, right? So it's definitely a dance to figure out that balance between the two. I think as well, there's a couple things that we can do, or that the security folks at an organization can do to help prepare for this. You mentioned two-factor authentication. We run that on our Webex instance, and to help secure that down and make sure people aren't getting unnecessary access or undue access to that. But then there's the other side of that, and that is the user activity, right? And how a user actually secures what's his or hers, right? I mean, just like in a physical instance, right? If I don't lock my office at night, or if I don't do some of the basic things that we do in the physical world, I'm inviting different crimes to occur, and the same thing happens in our virtual lives as well. So I think each of these platforms are using a kind of personal room and always on conference space, and making sure that those are locked when you don't want anybody else to join, or when you want to control who's in there and what's going on with that. Thinking about who has hosting capabilities, and who can expel people from a room, or how are people going to access this information. A lot of those things are little, and it's not something that you need a crash course or some huge training program in, but it's just being aware of your surroundings and understanding what's available to you. And sometimes it's just a little bit of a tweak, and hey, do you know that you can lock your space and not let anybody in, or that there's a lobby for you to be able to admit people into your personal room. Those sorts of things can go a long way in preventing a lot of those embarrassing things we've heard about. On the recording side, I think a lot of times recordings they happen in a meeting, and then they sort of get left to die on the vine. And it's like, oh, I got that recording in there, back in the Webex site, and I don't really need to think about it, or maybe I just don't think about it, right? The meeting's over and I don't want to talk about it anymore. But it is important for just like anything else that we collect or manage, right? We need to go back in there and see, do we still need these recordings? If we do, it makes sense to download those. If we want to leave those, we want to make sure that who has access to those is set correctly, right? Do I want to be able to give it to everybody in the meeting, even if it's 6 months down the line, or whatever else? So having some policies, I think, on the back end, when we run our adoption programs, we focus on those parts of the conversation, right? Of what policies do we have? What makes sense? Why do you need to keep your recordings for 6 months if you do? And it's sort of setting those things up so people are aware of those and can act accordingly. And to the slide that we're looking at here now, right? So one thing from a performance standpoint, depending on the policies at your organization, you may want to encourage people to turn off their VPN just from a bandwidth standpoint. But a lot of times we don't want them to do that. So we have some strategies there, right? Some split tunneling, and it's not necessarily my strongest suit on that, but it is, again, back to that collab security conversation, right? But I think with these new cloud applications, as they become more and more prevalent, thinking about your VPN strategy and making sure that it aligns with how people are accessing and is not limiting their ability to access those applications that are letting them do business effectively.
Great. So that concept there is make sure that you are locking down your rooms. You're using two-factor authentication to authenticate to these things, even though it's, quote, just web conferencing, right, or just a collaboration technology. There's still, credentials there that people could capture. And then the second is, as the screen's depicting, make sure that if you do have questions, feel free to reach out either to Katalyst or someone else. But make sure that if you are a VPN client and that you are using that technology to access on-premise applications or something in AWS or Azure that isn't a native SaaS app, what you're saying is split that at the client remote and send the pure conferencing traffic out to the cloud natively without coming back through the corporate office, right? And just really building almost two tunnels, one to your SaaS collaboration provider and one to your internal private apps, so that you're not backhauling that. Because let me just make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. In the event that everything was tunneled back to your corporation, even in a video conference like this today, that traffic flow would go from my workstation at home back to the corporate network, out to the cloud, from the cloud back to the corporate network, and back to me. So you're really putting two stops in the way instead of, as this screen depicts in this orange line, being able to natively connect. Okay, great. And that's something that you've seen success with on all three platforms, right? Not just Zoom or Teams or Webex, right? Okay. Okay, good. Good to know. Well, that's great. Security, super important, folks. If you guys do have challenges or questions about it, please reach out and let us know. That there's a lot of bad things that have happened just in the last week to organizations, and we want to make sure that you guys know there are ways to protect against those things, you know, and you can get as granular or as defense in depth as you want. Okay, Kyle, I'm going to get into kind of a philosophical conversation here. I know that I've been working from home. You know, I have, you know, five kids in total, and they're all at home at the same time, right? And maybe my wife is doing some on-demand learning for my kids in their school. Some of my college-age kids are doing their own Zooms or Webex or Teams meetings or whatever that particular entity is using. And then I may even have another individual in my home watching something on Disney Plus or Netflix or YouTube or pick one. So how do I handle this, and how do organizations still get work done without, you know, creating you know, mass chaos inside their own home and really animosity towards, well, dad's working, right, or mom's working, I can't watch Netflix.
That's right. Yeah, and this is you know, the word etiquette you mentioned earlier. I think it's key here, and you know, just like we set policies for an organization wide, and that helps drive value and gets everybody kind of on board with you know, an organization wide effort. The same thing applies to our personal homes and those sorts of things. And as that demand goes up, as I'm sure everybody has experienced to some extent in the last couple weeks, I think it's important to kind of set those rules and what that looks like, right, during the business day. Can we you know, cut down on the streaming levels for some of these maybe non-necessary apps, although depending on who's watching it, that may change what that definition looks like. But, you know, I think setting some ground rules about, you know, who's going to be streaming when and where and what that looks like. Do we need to be on video, which we'll talk about later, to maybe help some of that. Those sorts of things can really go a long way in helping those really important meetings or things that you have going on that you need to have full video or you know, high quality audio experience. Make sure that those work effectively. So yeah, definitely more of a mindset thing than anything else. Although there are definitely some quick helpful tips to tune down some of those things and cut down on the stream qualities, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges here that we've seen, I think, at Katalyst, as organizations have extended their workforce, you know, behind who knows what brand of home router for all these employees, right? Many of our organizations do supply either that broadband access or a secure work from home device that nails up a tunnel and still applies the corporate policy. Some choose to do that via a client on the machine, right, and deliver that same, you know, flagpole experience even when they're away from the flagpole. Are there things that the users could do? I mean, what the last thing I could imagine any organization wants to do is walking the COO through, you know, how to optimize his Linksys or his Ubiquity router, right? Do you feel like just in general we should just stay away from that kind of across the board, or do you feel like there's pocket cases where, you know, there can be opportunities to improve the one sole or two sole workers in the household?
Yeah, you know, and I think it's different for every organization. You know, QoS is a huge part of what we do with, you know, how our lab traffic runs over networks from an organization standpoint, and those same things apply to our home networks as well. And a lot of times there are easy tools on home routers, but a lot of times they're limited in what they can do, and depending on kind of the quality of the Wi-Fi and that sort of thing, it may be as simple as rolling out a device that is company owned or managed, depending on how many of those you need to roll out. That kind of helps with that, and it could be something a little simpler than that, but it's a big concern. Maybe not concern, but it's a big thing to consider in this, especially for homes when it's a CIO and you kind of know, hey, I need to make sure this guy's stuff's working. It's a little different than when you got 300 remote workers that you're trying to get rolling. So depending on what your organization looks like, it's definitely something to consider and something to make sure you're addressing, because it can become an issue very, very quickly.
Okay. So the net here is, don't be afraid to ask your loved ones or your family members to
Right.
postpone that show or that continuous office stream. I know some people that just want to have that on all the time, and they don't understand the impact. And most home networks now are capable of supporting those sorts of things, but that's definitely something that's good to know. Okay, great. Let's talk a little bit further about that. We've seen some folks that have actually advocated in the industry to plug in when possible. So again, your wireless connectivity and consumption in any house, I guarantee, is up fivefold today. We had one employee at Katalyst saying they had 5 or 6 video conferences going on at the same time. Their kids were on for school. He was on a video call. His wife was on a video call, etc. And so they had a great experience. But should we really be forcing that user or at least encouraging them to connect locally with cable, or do you feel like wireless is ubiquitous enough today that it just works well enough? What are we seeing in that space?
Yeah, I think that's maybe a backwards step there, but in this day and age, we've made wireless go a long way, and it can do some amazing things. I know some of our engineers have accomplished some amazing things for organizations about really making that wireless network stable, and the mesh is strong, and I can move from location to location and not have any disruption. A lot of times we aren't putting that same effort into our home wireless networks, and maybe we are that are on this call today, but I guarantee you a lot of the other end users and people that are utilizing this technology now have not. And I think people maybe forgot that they used to connect locally, and some of these new computers have made that difficult. But I think if you do encourage, hey, if you want the most stable, consistent experience and getting the most out of what you have available to you from an internet standpoint or from a network standpoint, then really hardwiring is going to give you that. And if that's possible, maybe even for 1 or 2 people, it can take some of that strain off that wireless network, and it may make that home network run a lot better. So I think giving people or letting people know that option exists can be a help to even our last point, and maybe some of the ones that are coming up as well.
Okay, and then let's take this one step further into the local realm. Let's talk a little bit about headset choices, right? So I see that you're on a wired headset. I'm on a Bluetooth headset. There's our CEO at Katalyst just got some newfangled headset the other day, and it literally the sound quality is excellent, the comfort's excellent, right? But everybody doesn't have a work from home kind of headset model. We have other organizations that are buying Plantronics for everybody, or the Cisco headsets for everybody, or these gaming headsets that really the gamers use that have noise cancellation and that sort of thing. What's the philosophy there? Because we know lots of people aren't taking their physical desk phones home. They're using their soft phone or their cell phone. What's the strategy around headset? And is that $100 a head really worth it in this kind of scenario? We don't know how long we're going to be here, but I'm just curious, what's kind of the overarching theme there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important to consider that and make sure that people have a comfortable, quality experience with. It's probably the most overlooked thing when rolling out soft phones. And we figured, oh yeah, soft phone, good to go. We'll run it on the desktop, no worries. You can click answer and you're good to go. And we've all been there when somebody does that and the computer speakers are, echoing, bouncing off the top, the lid of the laptop, and the microphone is kind of wonky, or you're, got it in a place where you haven't planned on that. So just like you would want that quality from a desk phone, and you want to be able to hear that nice quality voice and hear the person that you're listening to, I think it's important to consider that from a headset standpoint. And there are definitely ranges for sure. Some of those gamer headsets are fantastic, and the sound that they put out is top quality. We have some podcasters that do that on their own on the side, and you hear some of those microphones, and they just sound very, very crisp and clear, and there's not a lot of background noise. And some people will do that, and that can be very effective. But even just something as simple as a $20-$30 headset for somebody at home can really make a world of difference to that experience for everybody.
Okay, great, good to know. We've got several questions in the chat, so we're going to go ahead and hold those. We've got about 5 minutes left on a couple more slides, and then we'll get into those questions. So thank you guys for putting those in there. Please don't feel like you're going to be ignored. We will answer those here at the end, and would encourage everybody to participate there. Kyle, one of the things we've seen, and I understand even on this meeting today, we've seen maybe some video or some quality issues and that sort of thing. So what is it that organizations can do to go back and validate whether or not it is a problem on the end user side or on the cloud provider side, or somewhere in between? That is where that needle in the haystack concept comes to life, and we fight these sorts of things all the time. Of course, Absolutely. In an enterprise environment, we have many, many analytics tools and lots of tools in things like NBAR, NetFlow, and all this crazy tech stuff that you guys deploy to be able to track that. What about in this social space, right, or this collaboration space that is cloud driven, and we can't manage, everything on premise on our own? How do we even go about, tracking that information?
Yeah, and there are some handy tools that, again, probably a lot of people on this call have used a bunch, but maybe some of your end users haven't, and it's, important for you to pass that on to them. But even something as simple as a speed test to make sure that they're getting the network bandwidth that they're paying for, right, and make sure they're getting that value out of the contract that they've signed up for. I know we've experienced that with some people at home where the providers have kind of throttled that back. And knowing that can help a little bit from a troubleshooting standpoint. But on the other side, from an organizational side, right, all three are because they are cloud-based, all three of the platforms we're kind of looking at today all have some very, very handy troubleshooting tools. The one I'm most familiar with is the Cisco side. It's very powerful. You can go back in and look at the historical data of when people joined, how they joined, what the quality was, when the quality degraded, and you can track a lot of that information and find that out, and that's historical or live as the meeting is going on. So if you're getting complaints or you're on a meeting and you want to kind of track what's going on, you can very quickly do that. So I think because all of this is being run on these different organizations' platforms that they're managing right in the cloud for you, it really opens up some doors to what they can provide to you from a troubleshooting standpoint, and they have opened those up and allowed you to access those. So definitely some handy tools there, and we're happy to talk through those with you and kind of dive into them and look at those. You can spend all day kind of going into the weeds of what happened on each meeting if you wanted to, and most people don't want to do that, but at least you have the ability to go back and track something if you were picking up on some common errors or a lot of complaints from people, and do that. As well, I'll just throw this in quickly, a lot of the platforms do have sort of stat reports on what's going on, so if you're getting a lot of complaints, you can quickly go in there and just check. I will say those aren't typically super detailed, but they do have, you can kind of track and see, hey, if there's a yellow bar here or a red bar, at least I kind of know this is a known error and it's being fixed.
Okay, so I guess essentially all three of these platforms have what we would call a DVR, right, or the ability to go back in time as long as you have access to that that side of the portal, if you will. And then from there, you could particularly dig into a specific meeting or host ID and monitor that and see where where the problem may lie as well. Okay, good to know. Good to know. We're going to just take a quick break and answer a couple questions that are coming in. We are getting close to time. Again, we only have a couple slides. So one of the questions that was posted to the panel was, how does this work in a G Suite environment? So for any of the G Suite users that are out there, if you are consuming, GCP or Google Cloud as your internal platform, it is important to know that in that marketplace, in the Google marketplace, there is a Webex app and tool that you can install, a Zoom and Teams as well. There are some ways to federate that into GChat and some of the other things in the G Suite. We can talk more about that as well. So that was one. The other one is wired or wireless suggested? And so that could be in two flavors. Again, is wireless or wired suggested on how your end device plugs in? If you can afford to do the wired, we would always suggest that. We feel like you may have a better experience. There's no contention from your neighbors and from your own users in your home. But if you can't, then make sure your wireless is synced up. And if you can use the 5 gigahertz spectrum, we found a lot more success on that. And then on the headset side, again, depending on what device you're using, if you're using a video unit like I am, I choose to use wireless. I usually pace when I talk. Today I'm stationary, but you can use either one. The key is that you have a quality one. You'll have a much better experience. And then the last question that I have, I don't know if I can fully answer this, was around what is Zoom doing to address their security concerns? So we all saw the CEO of Zoom come out over the weekend and say Zoom security is their new culture. So he made a mistake. He owned up to it. We've seen what the market has done to those guys since then. But the point is, it seems like they're trying to infuse some good security R&D into the platform. I'm not sure how long that will take to be input. But again, they did publish some documentation around ways to make your personal space secure and that sort of thing. But back to our conversation earlier, don't skimp on 2FA. Don't skimp on those things that can make your environment much more secure because it will have a positive impact on you as well. Okay, Kyle, this is again kind of back to that netiquette, pre-planning, right? We all have time, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. We all have the same amount of time. Sometimes I go to meetings and there's all this content posted in the channel that the meeting originator set up and scheduled and provided me. Now, it's up to me whether or not I read those things before the meeting. But let's talk a little bit about some of the mechanisms that you can employ to make your meetings flow better, right? So the worst thing and the things that I can't stand is going to an agendaless meeting, right, and then getting on a meeting and being delivered information that I could have had or could have read before, right? So what are some of the things that in your adoption practice, right, what do you encourage your users to do when you're doing these organizational trainings? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's great. And just from a technical side, right, too, when you share those documents out live, that's another hit on that CPU processor and another stream that's going through, being pushed out to your internet and back down, right? So something to consider there as well. But this is where I think a lot of the asynchronous communications collaboration that again, really more Microsoft Teams, WebEx Teams have. Zoom has some of it. The other two are just a little stronger here on that front. That allows you to set up spaces or channels beforehand, right, where you can have those conversations. You can book the meeting, but you can put a lot of that documentation in there. And from an adoption side, we really work with organizations to come up with use cases for that, right, and get just a little shift in the mindset of how are we going to engage with people, right? Can I send this to them? Can I send an agenda in there beforehand? We can edit the agenda and say, hey, we can discuss this here over chat, and maybe we're meeting next week. But by the time we get to that meeting, we've discussed 75% of what was in the meeting beforehand. And when we get to the meeting, we can actually be moving on to steps that we wouldn't have even thought of until that meeting if we hadn't had that piece beforehand. So I think as much as possible, linking those meetings in with those spaces or channels, and starting that communication initially, and allowing people to have one place to do this. These sorts of things have been managed in email for a long time, or even in other, inboxes back in the day, right, where you put a docket of information in different people's inboxes. It's not a new process. It's just maybe some new ways of doing things that can be very effective. And we've seen some very, very effective use of this from organizations, and really kind of changed the culture and got people talking a lot more than they have in the past. And knowing that I don't have to necessarily check in on this all the time, but people can see, hey, they're going to see the documents that I posted, they're going to access them, and I'm going to come to that meeting with value actually being accomplished in that meeting. That really changes that 15-20 minute meeting from we'll wait for everybody to join, and we'll hopefully everybody gets on, and we got to wait for so and so because he has this document or whatever else.
It's like that YouTube video that's going around about the horrible conference call, right?
Absolutely, and we've all been on those for sure, for sure.
Okay, so good.
Very, very helpful stuff, and it's a little bit of a philosophical change, but a few tweaks can really make a huge difference.
Great. So let's stay on this theme of philosophy or culture for a second. One of the things we've seen is again, lots of organizations encouraging this kind of face-to-face communication. Obviously, that's why we've seen the explosion, not just from a collaboration perspective. But the point is that, there are times that are appropriate, to not send video, right, in a communication. And that could be obviously while you're driving, if you are out and about these days, or those sorts of things. But we have seen people do that. And so just 10 seconds on, kind of what's good and bad, and when to use it and when not to use it. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple considerations here as well. One is quality, right? If your video quality is not good, then that's something to consider in shutting it off. If it's an internal meeting and you've got maybe dogs in the background or whatever, those sorts of things, or kids in the background, or maybe just a funny picture in the background, which we've probably all seen those in the last couple of weeks as well. It's a good idea to maybe turn that off, but it's something to consider. Video is fantastic. It can really improve the efficiency of your meetings, but we want to be considerate. And I think even back to your funny back there earlier, right? We definitely want to keep it appropriate for sure.
Okay, good to know. We have one more question that's just come in. I'll go ahead and answer it now. And the question is, Kyle, I'll turn this one to you. And again, if you can exercise brevity, as we are coming up to the end of our time. Sure. But is there a better platform for sharing video, audio during the meeting?
I'm
I know you're kind of a bigot, right, for what you do every day in a couple of these technologies. So please try to be as agnostic as possible.
So I'm assuming that this means when you're sharing a recorded video, like a YouTube video or something along those lines. The issue has always been the bandwidth capabilities, right, of that. I would say that Cisco has led the way in this, in improving that sharing experience and enabling you to up that to 30 frames per second and be able to share your computer audio over the Webex meeting. And the other platforms are there. They're getting there. They have moved to that optimize, and you switch it over to video. But be aware that it still is not as robust as we probably all like it to be. If you are sharing video, it works pretty well. The audio portion works very well. I know we're short on time. I will say this, if you guys have heard of Jackbox, this has become popular for sharing this out and playing games like remotely with your friends, right, over these platforms. So the fact that you're able to kind of do some of these things shows that it is getting to the point where you're able to. But you do have to be careful on the bandwidth capabilities, because it can really cost some CPU usage.
Okay, good to know. I've got the dreaded, string and cans on the screen, but we have seen, even recently, people that still don't have the app, right? People that still don't, and everybody can see my calendar integration here is working pretty well. And I just wanted to show that as a live demo. But essentially, what can we do, when we do have an audio, challenge, or, maybe our phone blows up, or we are actually on a flip phone? How can we make organizations, better suited to handle those kind of grandpa, grandma-like requesters, right? Or maybe those old, crotchety folks that just can't get with the times, but yet they're leaders in the organization. And as technologists, we're still required to deliver a medium that's acceptable to them to communicate. So how do we do that?
Yeah, and I think some of the newer platforms are really pushing the VoIP experience, and from a quality standpoint, ease of joining, that really is probably the easiest. However, there are times when you aren't able to do that, or you maybe don't want to, and a lot of times from a strain standpoint on the bandwidth, joining from your PSTN from your phone using your phone number can really help with that as well. And in this category, again, Cisco is probably the most open on that. They allow the most different ways of joining, but Microsoft and Zoom both do have call-in options, and if you dial in to a meeting or have the meeting call you back and use that PSTN or that phone network connection instead of your computer, that can really help, especially if you're having quality issues. That can help do that. And a lot of those instructions are built into the joining experience to help some of those people that are maybe a little older, a little more set in their ways as far as how they join meetings.
And that's where, again, kind of scheduling it through the app or the plugin in any of these tools prepends the commas on there, right? Does the pound sign, does all that sort of host ID, so that when you do get on, you're not just joining as 704 or 803 or whatever your number is, and it asks out everything else. And then there's also some hard dollar savings by consuming this technology with voice over IP. And I know in many instances you've been able to go in and save tens of thousands of dollars annually, or even monthly in some instances. Folks, we have some clients that do 25 million meeting minutes literally a year, and that's a lot in volume as well. Well, Kyle, I've learned a lot as always, and I feel like the best thing about this open mic series is for me to be able to take this knowledge forth and to share it with people. So what I want to do is just kind of recap for the audience again. If we woke up in your shoes today, and this is at Katalyst how we try to answer questions specifically as we consult our clients, but there's really 10 things outside of the humorous slides that I showed at the beginning about the crazy backdrops or the unoriginal ones with the John Travolta, or obnoxious sports fans that just like to rub it in the face of others and that sort of thing. But really, we'll just break this down. And again, you guys can take this information, you can rebrand it, you can send it out to your organization. We're happy to get Kyle engaged or anybody from our adoption team to come and help that messaging. Again, we have offerings around that, not only from an implementation perspective, but also from just, hey, maybe we just need to message this correctly, right? And maybe we got it wrong, et cetera. So the first thing is make sure our clients are up to date, right? That's a very, very critical component to this. The second one was, and again, I'm just recapping quickly here, avoid the top and bottom of the hour if possible. Folks, I can't tell you how much more success you'll have if you stagger your meetings out and really avoid that contention, not only internally but externally. Limit the background applications that are running on your machine. Shut down everything that doesn't make sense, and you'll have a much better experience. Only stay connected to VPN, sorry for the typo there, if needed. I would encourage you guys, again, if you have always on VPNs and those sorts of things, please do reach out to your appropriate resource. We can help you get that stuff split tunneled and that sort of thing, and give your users a much better experience. Don't be afraid to challenge your household or your cohabitats around etiquette, right? Make sure that people are not interrupting or stepping on your toes and doing things from a streaming perspective that are counterproductive to what you're trying to do. Plug in if you can. That's either on the wireless or on the headset side. It's kind of a general theme that we talked about. Be sure you're getting what you're paying for, right? If you're using these services and you're consistently having bad experiences across your organization, it's time to do a little digging in and some research into why that is. Sharing collateral before the call is critical. We did talk about the optimization of the meetings and making sure that you guys go faster and further in your conversations with your employees and with your customers. When to be HD, that's an important component around shooting video and when that is appropriate. And again, if all else fails, join audio only and do it safely, but at least provide your clients and your users with the option to do that, because some people do have tech challenges at times. We all run into them as well. And then, just reiterating to you guys, we are out of time today. We have several more questions in the chat. Kyle is going to answer those via chat. We appreciate not only your participation today, but also the feedback. You will get a brief survey from this, and we have another open mic series coming up here in the next week or two. Sam will be sending out that information, and I'm not going to share the topic yet, but it is going to be one of the most exciting that we've done to date, and we're always happy to have offline conversations with you guys as well. So with that, I will go ahead and end the broadcast today. Thank you again for joining. We appreciate your support, and please let us know if there's anything we can do. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kyle, for joining. You did a great job.
Thank you.